Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf. Man, we got a lot to talk about now. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I am with Laith Marouf. Sorry, I'm doing a bunch of things at one time, but I just finished another stream, so I'm trying to get that all cleaned up. We got lots to talk about. Let's start by saying this. Rumble, we're having trouble streaming to your destinations. The stream was ended, deleted on the destination. It looks like what the hell's happening? I don't know. Well, if we're on Rumble, we're on Rumble. If we ain't, we ain't. Let me see. Who knows? Yeah, it is what it is. We'll give it a shot. We'll upload it later. Forget it. All right, we got important stuff. We got bigger fish to fry right now than whether we're on Rumble this very second. Don't forget, before we get started, Laith Marouf has a great website. It's freepalestine.video, where they do a lot of good work. Go there, check out all of their good stuff. And they do English language work, documenting what's going on in the region, giving you great video, giving you great journalism, and making some opportunities for young people to learn in the region. And what is important is that you go to freepalestine.video and donate, because, hey, look, it takes money to keep this thing going. So let's try to all get together as a community and work with them, try to keep them on the air. Freepalestine.video. If you can't afford to donate, that's fine. Take care of your family. That's what we're all about here. But what you can do is you can share the freepalestine.video website on all of your social media channels, and just put a little note for others. Hey, go here. Please donate to help the cause and keep this good work going. All right, Laith, let's start here. Man, we got lots going on. We're going to start with the helicopter crash. There's speculation. We don't know. There's great speculation. Interestingly, the Russians immediately were in contact with the Iranians. I think they understand the danger of the situation. I think they also were sending the message to the Iranians: we're on your side. We got your back. But your thoughts, what do we know? What information do we have coming out of the region, coming out of Iran? And even, let's do this. We're responsible here. We're not going to blindly speculate, but what is the speculation also in the region? So let's start with let's do this. Let's start with what we know, and then we'll get to what people are speculating.
All right. So what we know is the Iranian president was visiting the border with Azerbaijan, where they inaugurated a dam that's on the river, shared on the border, and the president of Azerbaijan was there. They were on Iranian territory in the province of eastern Azerbaijan, where they inaugurated the dam. And as the president left with his entourage, 3 helicopters, American-made Bell helicopters from the 1970s that don't have pieces, parts that are from the United States because of the sanctions, and are fixed with machined parts from Iran market. The helicopter that was carrying the president and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Abdullahian, and the governors of both East and West Azerbaijan provinces in the north of Iran crashed, and they all perished. In the beginning, we were told it was a soft landing, and then the search took a very long time because the fog and rain and cold weather that hit the mountain region there. During all of this, I was kind of in shock, and I didn't believe anything that I was hearing, actually, including, the Minister of Internal of Iran, just an hour after the crash, claimed that they received 2 calls from delegates on the plane on cell phone, and that they spoke to them. And then around 2 a.m. in the morning, he repeated saying that they had received another call from one of the crew members around 2 a.m. that crew member was hearing the sirens of the search teams. So ultimately, everybody that was on the helicopter was found dead. So how does these stories, make sense? How does these announcements from the Iranian governments make sense? I personally don't think any of that, what we heard over those 12, 14 hours of the supposed search, were true information. And that's what's obviously bringing up the speculations that something more sinister than just a technical difficulty crash happened.
Okay, so now that we have what we have, and I'm big on this. There's nothing to me worse than people who speculate and don't label it speculation, right? People say, I know what happened. It was this, that, and the other. I think that's irresponsible. It's not irresponsible to speculate, but it's irresponsible if you don't say, look, I don't know this for sure, but this is what people are thinking. This is what I think. I think that's reasonable. Now, let's go there. Let's go to, and I'm going to label this to everybody who's watching. Garland and Laith are not saying this is what happened. Garland and Laith are saying there's speculation in the region, and these are the speculations. You can take them with a grain of salt. You can evaluate them. You can research them on your own, but we're not taking a position that we know what happened. Let's talk about the speculation in you, because I know there's speculation in my part of the world, but one of the reasons it's important to talk to you is because you're in Beirut and you hear on the ground a different conversation in the Muslim world, etc., in the region. Let's hear about the speculation in your region, in your world.
Okay, so there's a lot of alarm bells in the story. Number one is 2 of the helicopters which were flanking the helicopter that was carrying the president and the foreign affairs minister and the delegations made it to their destination without a problem. So this brings the question of why the other helicopters didn't have a problem with the weather. The other is 2 helicopters flanking the presidential helicopter usually fly just a little bit behind it.
Right.
How did they lose track of the helicopter? Didn't they see it crashing? Didn't they try to help people fly over it or something? I don't know. So this part of the story doesn't make sense. Okay. Let's talk, the idea that there was calls made from the crash site and people survived, and somehow we don't find them survived, and we never heard these calls and the ministers. So all of this, along with the fact that you remember, if our viewers remember, just a month ago, less than a month ago, Iran retaliated for the attack on its embassy in Damascus with the biggest ever attack on Israel, and the Israelis didn't really retaliate or attempted, but they didn't have the technical capabilities to land a blow in the same way as Iran did. So this, opens the question, was the response of Israel, the retaliation of Israel, the revenge of Israel, was it this assassination and the downing of this helicopter? Finally, is that the idea that historically, Israel, anytime it loses on the battlefield, it retaliates with assassinations of leaders of the resistance. This is true in all of its wars. This is true of what happened in the occupation of Lebanon. This is true of what happened during the Second Intifada. This is true what's happening right now. As Israel is losing the battle on the grounds of Gaza, what did they do? They went and assassinated Hamas's representative in Beirut earlier in the year. So clearly, the only thing that Israel has a pattern of is assassinations to save face in because of their losses on the battlefield. And so this is why these are indicators that this is an assassination. We also know that President Putin of Russia called in the Iranian ambassador immediately after the crash without us even knowing that there's a death, martyrdom of these people, into a meeting with all the highest officials of the Russian government, Minister of Defense, heads of the space and flight agencies, the ministers of foreign affairs, and all of their top brass, and that this meeting lasted hours. And as we know right now, President Putin is flying into Iran to be part of the official commemorations of the death of Raisi, and he's bringing with him one of the biggest delegations ever to arrive into Iran. So there's a lot of talk behind the scene between these powers about what's happened in this crash. And I would say, in my opinion, looking at how Israel attempted to drag the United States into a war with Iran, with the attack on the embassy in Damascus, and the fact that that was not sufficient enough to trigger a full-out war between Iran and Israel that will drag the United States in, because Israel is losing the war and needs the US to intervene in any shape or form. This is what Netanyahu wants. It even makes it more likely that this assassination happened by the Israelis with the intention of forcing Iran into full war with Israel. And I think, given the fact that the Iranians delayed any response and stretched all this search, which I personally don't even believe that it was that difficult to find the site. Iran has satellites. Iran has most advanced drones. It could have found the crash site in minutes. Probably they did, and they just stretched the time to figure out what they want to do. And I think what they decided is that, because Netanyahu wants this war, that they will actually not admit that this is an assassination of their own president. Because if they admit that this is an assassination of their president, they have no choice.
Yeah, it's Casus Belli.
Yeah, they have to go to a full-out war. So now, and that would have derailed them from their full plan, long-term plan that they had laid out with the axis of resistance, of chiseling at the power of Israel and boiling it as a frog in water, and making it slowly collapse internally and all its external support collapsing, without having to have a full-out war. Netanyahu wants to have a full-out war to save himself, and so the Iranians are choosing not to be derailed from their long-term plan, and they are choosing to hide the fact that their president got assassinated.
I think, let me show you something else too. And as I said, I want everybody to know what right now Laith and I are doing is we're being creative, we're speculating, we're telling you what it points to possibilities. We're not saying that we know, we're not being irresponsible, we're not saying we know anything for a fact, but we're just looking at this saying, based on some of the things that we see, these are the possibilities. Let me add something to this. Here's an article. Middle East Monitor, ex-deputy Mossad chief, we lost the war in Gaza, achieved nothing. Former Mossad chief Red bin Barak said the aggression against Gaza is a war that Israel is losing. This war lacks a clear objective. It's evident that we're unequivocally losing it, right? He was speaking during an interview with Israeli public radio. A former member of the Knesset says that the occupation army has been forced to return to fighting in the same areas in which it's fought. Israel is losing on the international scene. Relations with the U.S. are deteriorating. The economy is collapsing. Show me one thing we have succeeded in during the war, right? So why is that important? Because as we were just talking, what does it show? It shows the same thing as Zelensky. It shows a level of desperation. Look, do I believe that? Yeah, I believe he said it because that's an honest evaluation. That is a glaringly obvious evaluation. He's even saying it. We go back into the same place we fought before. We get our butt kicked there. We're losing. We're getting nothing out of it. And the kids are in the street in the U.S. all over saying they hate our guts. You look at the polls that Israel's losing everything. And what happens when an animal gets cornered? Look at Zelensky. He's trying to drag the U.S. in there. Look at the thing. So they're so desperate now that there are no links that they won't go to. So I agree, there is a possibility. It would be irresponsible not to consider the possibility that this was an assassination. Add this, and these are all facts. Israel has committed terrorist acts with the U.S. on Iran's ground before. They've killed nuclear scientists. They've blown stuff up. They've attacked pipelines. They've done assassinations. They fomented unrest and fomented riots and things like that, and then attacked the people in the riots. So it's not unreasonable to think that Israel could be involved. You also have to look at what's happening in Slovakia. Some guy comes out, he shoots tries to assassinate the leader of Slovakia. We now find out it has been released. Now, I reported on that yesterday. Whether it's 100% true or not, I think it is, but it has been reported, at least in all throughout the mainstream media, that the Slovakian investigators are saying that 2 hours after the assassination attempt, when the assassin had been arrested and was in custody, someone went on his internet stuff and started to delete his communications. It appears that somebody was trying to take him out. The guy's wife is Ukrainian. I'm just saying, throwing that out there. He was opposed to what was going on with his country backing off the Iran war. So when you look at an attempted assassination over here, a guy who opposes U.S. policy, right? And Zionist policy, etc. You look over there, you put all these things together, it would be irresponsible not to at least consider the fact that this was an assassination. But as you said, whether you agree with it or not, if that in fact is the case, then you have to say it's likely that the Iranians would say, we're not going to go down that route because that would derail our plan. And then Netanyahu would get what he wanted. Whether you agree with it or not, you can see some logic in that. Laith.
Yes. And it's very possible that Iran will go the clandestine spy assassination route also to retaliate and make it that it's not traceable to them, to avoid. So it doesn't mean that Iran is not going to retaliate, but if they actually admit that this was an assassination, then they have to go to full war. And this is what Netanyahu wants. Look, there was the attempted assassination in the Congo of the president, attempted coup led by Israeli Americans. And we had, as you said, the Slovakia attempt. So worldwide right now, the empire is activating the full spectrum war, okay, at maximum levels. So we're seeing these assassination attempts and so on being activated, and it all happened within 24-hour, 48 hours span. These attempts at coups and assassinations in places that the United States is feeling the heat. And I want to say that the persons of Raisi and Abdullahian were very important targets. This is not like a little joke, Raisi was responsible for signing the 25-year strategic agreements and alliances with China and Russia. He was responsible for the ascension of Iran into BRICS. He was responsible for signing the strategic security coalition with Niger in the Sahel. He was the father of this policy of reintegrating the Sahel with Iran and Russia, guaranteeing the security of these countries. So this is somebody that I would even say that Iran, China, and Russia would have a harder time on the global scale to birth this multipolar world without individuals like Raisi and Abdullahian in Iran. And the least of it, this assassination, what it did, how the win that Israel got. Yes, Iran is a constitutional democracy, as institutions, and will immediately replace these individuals. It's not gonna, but at least the least of it is that Iran is now going to be busy for the next week with the repercussion of the martyrdom of Raisi and Abdullahian. And in the meanwhile, in the last 24 hours, the Zionists have been going buck wild in the West Bank. They killed 8 people this morning in Jenin. There's full invasion in many of the towns and cities. There's rampaging colonists, setting fire to whole villages. And the whole world is now focused on the funeral of President Raisi. And Iran itself, as a foreign affairs that led the support for the Palestinians on the global scale, on the United Nations front and every other place, is now in pause until all these changes happen. Iran's security is all looking inside to protect these processions for the funeral and so on, and to make sure no other attacks happen. And I want to finally remind everybody that in the last 6 months alone, there's been so many attacks by the Zionists on Iran itself, inside Iran, including, if everybody remembers, the terrorist attack on the commemoration of General Soleimani's assassination early in January, the attacks that happened by ISIS. So this is kind of a bigger picture to what we're talking about.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Any word, or before we go any further, Hezbollah, what's happening in the north of the fighting that's going on? I saw recently a picture of this Israeli base, and the whole damn thing was in flames. And they were saying, there's a small fire on the base. I looked at it, I'm like, that don't look like a small fire. It looks like incineration. It looks like they got collapsed with missiles. But of course, usually. So what do we know about what's happening in this conflict? Let me add this to people that say, well, why isn't Hezbollah getting involved? Yeah, I don't know what else they can do at this point. They're not going to cry. Every time I turn around, they're fighting, they're shooting, they're bombing, they're hitting things with missiles, shooting down drones. The Houthis are shooting down drones. It seems to me there is, in fact, a regional war going on. But the mainstream media and a lot of people are pretending like it's not. But Hezbollah is heavily engaged, as are the Iraqis, as are the resistance in Yemen.
Yes. I mean, last time we were on the show, we talked about that balloon that the Hezbollah shot down, the surveillance balloon. Well, now they shot down the biggest Zeppelin security balloon in the world. Okay, and the Israelis have 2 of them. One that is tethered around the Dimona nuclear reactor to protect or surveil any danger coming to that reactor, and the other in the north of Palestine. And what we saw is that Hezbollah targeted all the on-the-ground equipment and control centers, as well as shot down this Zeppelin, and came back with high-quality 4K camera drone that flew over the site and filmed the destruction and the Zeppelin on the ground. So this is very advanced stage of activities, and Hezbollah to release this video in 4K to show you how much detail they have, and how the fact that the Israelis can't even spot these drones or shoot them down. The battle in the air of northern Palestine continues. Every day, Israelis attempt with their F-15s and F-16s to shoot down Hezbollah drones, and every day they're failing. They haven't been able to shoot one drone down. So now we clearly see that there is air superiority for Hezbollah drones in the battle in North Palestine. We're also, because of the last time that Hezbollah shot down a Hermes 900 Israeli drone, and somebody, a civilian here in Lebanon filmed. When Hezbollah released that video of them shooting down the Hermes, they cut out the second where you see the missile hitting, because they didn't want the Israelis to know what weapon they were using. But some civilian here in Lebanon found the missile on the ground, parts of it, and took a picture of it stupidly and put it on the internet. So now we know that that Hezbollah, what kind of weapons they have, and these anti-air defense missiles are actually capable of shooting F-15s and F-16s. And so it seems like up until now, Hezbollah is choosing not to shoot down the F-15s and F-16s. But now, after this assassination, in my opinion, of Raisi, I think they will be activating those. So Hezbollah has proven air dominance over North Palestine. They're going to now make Lebanon a no-fly zone for the Israeli jets. And they continue to pound you were talking about that base full all out on fire. This is a base in the Golan Heights. Just to explain to our viewers, the Golan Heights, the occupied Syrian territory, has a lot of bases because it overlooks Damascus, it overlooks South Lebanon and North Palestine. But also all the colonies in the Golan Heights are populated by soldiers. Okay, there's no regular colonies in the occupied Golan Heights. They're all staff of the military defense that are living in those colonies. And those have already been evacuated completely. The Golan Heights right now has only the remaining Syrian civilians that refuse to take Israeli citizenship since 1973. And the military bases. Everything else is emptied in the Golan Heights. And to see these bases burn, okay, and this is happening on a daily basis. Yesterday, they fired on 100 missiles on one of these bases, and so they're kind of carpet bombing the whole area, Hezbollah, and it's making it a very soft ground for any military activity that could happen. This is kind of the situation in Lebanon, and I think it's going to heat up very soon, even more so.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me. I just wanted people to see what was going on there. Also, let me show something. Also, I think it's important for people to know, because when people see, I mentioned a while back that Baltimore a few years back, people looked up in the sky to the north of Baltimore. They're like, "What the hell is that giant Zeppelin doing up there?" This thing is giant. And next thing you know, it's on the news like there's a giant balloon in the air, and people are like, "What the hell is this?" And here's why. Hezbollah, they didn't just shoot a balloon down to say, "Ha ha, we got them," like the U.S. with a weather balloon. Let me show you this balloon and what it does, right? Okay. If you look at this was an article from 2015 when it happened. Second military airship getting Baltimore area to test an East Coast missile defense system, right? So you see, this is the balloon that they shot down. I'm sure you've seen pictures of it. This is what has been flying around. This is what has been shot down, right? What is it? It's a Joint Land Attack Cruise Missile Defense Elevated Netted Sensor System, the JLENS blimp, right? Okay. It's an East Coast missile defense system. So here's my point. Hezbollah knew what they were doing. This was not just, we're going to stick this blimp up and find out what the barometric pressure is over East Lebanon. This is part of a missile defense system. It's a And they put them up, and they have these sensors really high so they can pick up the missiles coming in. It helps to coordinate, it helps to target them, all that kind of stuff. So what Hezbollah did was it eliminated, again, like we said, they hit their air defense systems. These are not just, oh, there's a blimp, we'll shoot it down because that'll make us look good. It was, there's part of a missile defense system. We know what it is. We're going to take out part of their missile defense system and make them more vulnerable. So even this, people who just heard, oh, they shot down a balloon, they think of the Chinese weather balloon. They don't realize this was a strategic operation to limit the technical abilities of occupied Palestine, of the Zionists, to defend themselves from missile attacks.
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, Hezbollah destroyed all the front bases and all the electronics on them, and then began slowly over the months, going further and further deep in, destroyed all the major air and electronic defense sites in the north of Palestine and in the Golan Heights, and has lately, because of the destruction of the air defenses and the surveillance equipment and so on, has been able to go further and further deeper into occupied Palestine, reaching around almost 40 kilometers at the south edge of Tabariya Lake, or Sea of Galilee, and all the way beside Akka on the coast of the Mediterranean. So this is now making it easier for the drones to fly under the radars without any air defenses and reaching further and further. And, we discussed earlier, you brought up the article from the Israeli intelligence talking about, that they lost the war in Gaza. Well, they also lost the war in the north of Palestine. It's clear 100% that there is full dominance by Hezbollah. We can talk more about Gaza and what's happened in the last few days to confirm that actually right now the Israeli military is at the edge of full collapse on that front.
Continue
that
on that. Continue on. I've heard that, again, even that Mossad guy admitted that the Israelis had some areas that they had bombed everything out. They thought they were, they thought they had completely dominated and eliminated everybody in that area. And they went in and they got ambushed again, and they got hit again. And they realized they have, everywhere they go, when they come back in, that Hamas is always, or that the fighters, they're not all Hamas fighters. There are other groups, but they're always, talk about what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, the battle in and around Jabalia in the north of Gaza has now been ongoing for a week, and it is the most intense, bone-crushing, face-to-face battle that has played out since the beginning of this war. And as we said in the previous episodes, the Israelis lost a field general on the first day of that invasion of Jabalia, and since then they've lost multiple brigadier generals and other high-ranking officers. It's almost 20, according to Israeli media. It's almost 20 officers, high-ranking officers, dead in this battle in the last week. And every day, Hamas and others are releasing videos of their operations. We can count in this week at 20, 30 tanks from just the confirmed videos that are being released, destroyed. And I think what's important about these videos is not only the evidence of this destruction, it shows you that actually Hamas has full operational control on the field. They can kind of design what teams they want to send, with what cameraman, and to film what action, and to come back with this camera person alive to the command center where everything's edited and the music is put on and the graphics and so on to be released. So this shows you full operational control in northern Gaza, in the most intense battlefield. And so that's what's important about this battle in Jabalia. And we see that the Israelis haven't dared yet into Rafah, because they know that if this is the battle for Jabalia, imagine what will happen in Rafah. But one thing that happened, almost simultaneously with the downing or the crash of President Raisi's helicopter, was the Americans announcing that they finished building their pier into Gaza on the beach. And the first images that come out are of American military equipment, air defenses, radars, sitting on the beach of Gaza, and tanks and APCs waiting in the deployment ships. So what we now know is exactly what I thought was going to happen. I didn't think this spear was about bringing aid. It definitely was not about mass expulsion of Palestinians. This was an invasion beachfront, building that possibilities in the situation that Israeli military completely collapses on the battlefield, and we're right now at the edge of that. This is why Netanyahu is rushing to a full-out war. He wants the Americans to come in because his military is demoralized. He lost 90 somewhat percent of all of his armaments. He cannot survive without every 24 hours an American ship or an American plane, heavy lift plane, arrives with munitions. If one of those ships or planes doesn't arrive on its time, they can't even fire. They don't have enough to go around. He needs that. And this is where the pier that the Americans built in Gaza is all about that. It's about an invasion of Gaza.
I think you're right. Yes, it's about at some point wanting to put American troops, NATO troops, or whatever in into Gaza, because Israel's not. It's not that Israel's losing; it's that Israel has lost. That I think we could argue that what we found is that Israel doesn't even really exist. You know what I mean? Israel. I hate to go back to this metaphor, but I always go back to it. When you've seen movie after movie where you'll see at the beginning of the movie you see a hand and there a glove being slid on the hand, one finger at a time, a black glove, and you know that they're going to choke somebody out or the criminal's going to do something. They put a glove on their hand to hide their fingerprints so that they can't be tied to the scene of the crime. Israel, Ukraine, they are black gloves. The empire uses Israel and Ukraine so that their fingerprints won't be at the scene of the crime. That this is the U.S. empire. And as soon as this happened, Israel, their military got the crap kicked out of them in day one. I mean, Hamas just came in and slapped them aside like a small child. And then the U.S. came in, and the U.S. Armada came in, and the U.S. military, and everybody came in. But from day one, Hamas walked up to Israel and just slapped them out of the way. They weren't even concerned with them. They crushed them on day one. When you look at the kind of mess that they were in, the U.S. came in to defend an Israeli military, an Israeli political system that had already been militarily, and I would argue intellectually, philosophically defeated. They had no idea that those guys could beat them and could deliver that kind of punishment. And when they stood there, oh, we're tough, the only thing they could ever do was go into like a heavy-handed policeman and go into the occupied territories and beat up women and children and grab defenseless people. And as soon as they had to fight people of a military mind with a military drive, they got stomped into the ground on day one, and they called for Big Brother. They called for the real military. And the U.S. came in and says, okay, we'll send a military in that's going. I guarantee you that there's U.S. is fighting right now, that U.S. military is in there fighting right now, because Israel doesn't have a military. They were a front. They were a police force, a colonial police force for the U.S. empire, and that police force has been defeated.
Yes, and there is right now, by the way, a act being put on the docket of the Congress to pay veteran pay to Americans that serve in the Israeli military.
They might as well.
So it's an admittance that they're already there on the battlefield. Okay. And we know that a day after October 7th, there was hundreds of flights leaving Canada, the US, and Europe. I mean, in Toronto alone, something like 20 or 40 flights left, full of Canadians that are not citizens of Israel, that to fight on the side of the Zionist colony. And of course, all of these deaths are because most of these people are probably put in the front line like fodder, and those deaths are not reported in the losses of the Israeli military in this battle. This is above and beyond all the mercenaries that were dragged out of Ukraine, all the Wahhabi death squads that were on the field in Syria that were brought in. These are all actually fighting the war in Gaza, and none of that is reported. So the losses, the Israelis lost 12 bases, 12 generals on day one in October 7th. They lost their main bases for the Mossad, Shin Bet, and their main paratroopers, police force base, all of that, all in one day. And since that day, it's the American government, the American military that is actually conducting this war in full details. Every decision that the Israeli military is making, there's an American general beside them. There's even some generals that are filling gaps in the hierarchy of the Israeli military structures because of their heavy losses since October 7th. And, so yeah, Israel has been defeated day one in Gaza. It's now solidified that defeat with a total collapse of the industrial military complex that Israel has. Their factories can't keep up with anything. By the way, Hezbollah is hitting Israeli military factories every week. At least one of those are being hit because the majority of them are in the north of Palestine. These military hardware factories, and so any minute now, if this war continues, we will be seeing Abrams tanks and Challenger tanks being handed on to Israel because it is running out of their Merkava tanks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Now let's move to the international scene, and I will add this: the U.S. has been exposed because the only, I mean, it's the same. The U.S. Army could go to Afghanistan or Iraq, and they could send people around, and they could shoot civilians and blow up weddings and all that kind of stuff, right? When they decide to go into Ukraine and face the Russian army crushed the Ukrainian proxy army, the most powerful proxy army that the U.S. has ever had. The Russians smashed them to pieces. They rebuilt it. The Russians smashed that to pieces. They rebuilt it a third time, and the Russians are doing the same thing. So in reality, we see that the U.S. empire, just as we said about Israel, they could blow up wedding parties. They can attack farms with olive growers and things like that. They can do that. But when it comes to going against the Russian army on the Russian border, that ain't happening. When it comes to fighting against the Muslim fighters in the West Asia, better not do that because you're going to get beaten. So the U.S. empire has been exposed as a paper tiger, NATO as a toothless paper tiger. Now, let's go to the international scene, the ICC. A while back, the U.S. was like, yeah, we love the ICC. They've come out, they've come up with charges against President Putin for kidnapping children. I might add, 160 of those children recently turned up in Germany. Not one complaint from the parents of the children. No parents complained, but the U.S. said, oh, they're kidnapping children. Oh, we love the ICC. Now the ICC looks at the most obvious case of criminality in the history of this world and says, yeah, it might just have to get some charges on that. And the U.S. is literally threatening to, the members of the court, saying, being honest, we can't allow you to go after our allies. They're giving it up. The only thing that they can do is, this is supposed to be a puppet court that goes after the organization, goes after their adversaries. I think the Brits, some of the other countries are starting to get a little scared too, saying, crap, man, if they charge them, they can charge us. Now, of course, the puppets, they're like, we're going to have to go after Hezbollah too. And Hezbollah says, we'll cooperate. You want a trial? We want a trial. We want to be able to present our evidence. Let Israel present their evidence. Let's do it. Israel, your thoughts on the ICC potential charges? All that, keeping in understanding that this whole thing has been dominated by the U.S. and it's a U.S. imperial operation, even notwithstanding that accusation by me. I think this is an interesting recent happening. Anyway, go ahead, Laith.
Yes. I mean, historically, 42 out of the 42 people, other than Putin, that the ICC charged are African. So, historically, it was supposed to be just the, Slavs and the slaves. This is in their white supremacist mind. The ICC is only there to prosecute, Slavic people and African people. So it is, maybe a surprise for some people that actually these charges were laid by the ICC. But I personally think that this is one of the worst things that could have happened to the Palestinian people. And I would say even that Mahmoud Abbas, the collaborationist puppet, purposefully brought this case to the ICC in order to implicate the leadership of Hamas in charges of war crimes, to get them out of his way. And if we, given the fact that no one in the West will support the arrest of Netanyahu or Gallant if they touch their territory or fly over their airspace. Clearly, the number one target of this whole theatrics is Ismail Haniyeh, the head of the political bureau of Hamas, who's residing right now in Qatar.
Isn't he the one that flies back and forth to do the negotiating? So they create an environment where he can't fly. But basically, they stop they stop the Hamas negotiator from being able to
Yes, and he has
negotiate.
to
That's
now
the
leave Qatar and go hide somewhere in a country that will not hand him over to the Americans or the ICC. And the other Hamas leaders, what's his name, Laith, who leads the military wing, and Sinwar, who leads the government on the ground in Gaza, nobody can touch them because they can't even reach them, the Israelis, to kill them, let alone arrest them. And so I think that this was all a ploy just to charge the resistance with terrorism or war crimes. And in fact, if you look at the docket that this puppet Khan, the head of the ICC, put forward, when you look at the language he used talking about the Palestinians and the accused crimes that they're against them, he speaks about it as if it's a fact that there's rape, that there was murder, that there was, what have you. And he had went to Israel and to these colonies that got attacked on October 7th, and spoke to the families and whatever, and the survivors, but he refused to go to Gaza, even though Hamas and the Palestinians invited him to, witness the crimes that are happening against them. He refused to go. And in the language, when he talks about the crimes that Netanyahu and Gallant are accused of, he always uses reasonable grounds to believe that there is a crime committed. He never says that there was a crime committed, like he uses the language in speaking about Hamas. And finally, the most telling thing about this is that the prosecutor Khan limited the scope of this whole case to only the territory of Gaza, and only since October 7th. Okay, so that excludes obviously all the war crimes of building colonies in the West Bank. It excludes all the torture and killing of Palestinian prisoners since October 7th. There's now 12,000 Palestinian prisoners that have been denied food, access to lawyers, families, phones, radios, TVs, and have been tortured and raped on a daily basis, refused medical care, in the
attacks on the hospitals. They can't go out and do all of that.
Yes, none of that can be talked about, and so he clearly the ICC and with it the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas plotted this all to get to work against Hamas. And this is why I personally think it was a really bad day for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't know much about it, but now I'm glad you enlightened. The limits that they placed on it benefit one party far more than the other. You know what I mean? It's so obvious. The limits that they placed on these charges are on behalf of Israel. And here's the thing: the last I heard, they applied for a warrant. When that warrant comes out, I'll believe. You know what I mean? So they applied for a warrant. Is the warrant ever going to come out?
Yeah, I
You know
bet you
what I
the
mean?
ones against Hamas will come out first.
Exactly. Well, yeah, we've got the ones against Hamas. We're still working on the ones in Israel. We're having some problem with that printer, but when we get it done, we'll get them. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's for sure. They'll be out in 24 hours. The others will be out in 100 years. You know, but at any rate, yeah. So we will believe it when we see it. That there's, I'll believe it when I see it. And the other thing about it is, as you said, if I see that these charges, as you said, are restricted in a way that let's face it, they're restricted in a way that shields Israel from the majority, from the predominance of its crimes. The predominance of the things that have done are shielded by this. So yeah, okay. I'm glad you enlightened us on that, Laith. One last thing I wanted to ask you about. And let me see if I got it here.
And of course, like I just before you asked that question, you know, the huge problem of putting moral equivalency between the occupier and his resistance. Can you imagine if the Vietnamese resistance or the Algerian resistance were brought to the ICC and their resistance, or even the French resistance to Nazi occupation, would put an equivalency that you killing a Nazi soldiers or Nazi colonizers or American or French colonizers, that equals the mass killing of Vietnamese and Algerians? This is where
even use the German Nazis, the Warsaw Uprising, right? Imagine if the people in the ghetto who were being slaughtered by Nazis fought back with a few guns and what little they had, and the International Criminal Court came up and said, now we're going to charge the people who rose up against these Nazis who were taking them to death camps, but we're also going to charge the Nazis. It's absurd. You have a right, not even a right, you have a duty. And under the international law has already ruled at the UN that the Palestinians, as the occupied, have a right to use force to defend the occupation. In that context, number one, how do you charge them? Number two, any allegations of what the Hamas did on October 7th at this point is nothing but the word of Israel. The only thing we have is the word of Israel. Israel has made claims that have been debunked. So how can you charge them with a crime based only on the word of an illegal occupier? And none of it makes sense. Like,
oh yeah, and imagine that let's say in that hypothetical of the Warsaw Ghetto, that the prosecutors say, hey, we will only start the discussion about the minute the Warsaw Ghetto fought back.
right.
We're not going to talk about the dragging of people into death camps. No. And only crimes committed inside the ghetto.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Forget Auschwitz, where they're throwing people in ovens. You can't bring that. Not relevant. The fact that once you got out of the death camp, you were going onto a train to be none of that. You know, that the reason you were uprising because all your families had been taken, kidnapped, and murdered. None of that's important. The only thing we're going to go with is what happened in the death. Yeah, it's pretty preposterous, isn't it? It's obvious what's going on here. I did want to ask you, since you're there, your thoughts on the before we go, the Ukraine conflict, where we are there. You know, it's obvious. Let's face it, things ain't looking good for the Ukrainian puppetry. They're going under. The What's interesting is this mass psychosis amongst the ruling elite of Europe and the US, acting as though there's something they can do. We might know, we may have to act. We may not let the Russians, can't let the Russians win, as though they actually have some kind of a military option that can go to the Russian border and it won't be crushed. They don't have the troops, they don't have the war material, and their people at home will go bananas if they send their soldiers to get crushed. But this mass psychosis amongst the ruling elite and what's going on in Ukraine, as let's face it, the Russians are, a victory is inevitable. Anyway, your thoughts on Ukraine?
Yes, the Americans can't keep up with their two beloved vassal nations. Which one are they going to give more weapons to? I mean, yes, it's two Zionist Jews that run these two countries, but there's the favorite one. There's the first Jewish state. So clearly you're right. They're having psychosis, but also it shows you that they have no choices left. Tactical choices in front of them, and so they just talk hyperbole. And of course, the Russian military is advancing around the Kharkov region. And so, looking at what happened in Iran, and I would say it's becoming more and more higher possibility of the clandestine work happening. Remember, like last year, was it that the assassination of the mercenary army leader, what's his name? The Russian. There was that assassination on him. Point is, what I'm trying to say is that Russia right now has to be careful because of if the West is losing on the battlefield, there will be attempts to, as we saw, attacks on music halls, terrorist attacks,
Terrorism. That's all they got left is terrorism.
Assassination possibilities, and that's what's scarier in this stage globally. And we see. I think the best defense for Russia is to continue moving slowly and surely and bleeding out the NATO, not to rush into things, as the leadership in Russia has been smart about that, and to continue to trouble regions around the world, help other regions around the world escape American imperialism. Look at what happened in Senegal this week, by the way. You remember we were talking about the president of Senegal, a young man got elected, he's anti-French. He just said that he wants to join the Sahel coalition federation. He wants to kick out the French troops. That also happened in Gambia. So
New Caledonia. Have you been following that in the Pacific?
Oh, yeah.
The New Caledonians are in the streets saying, "France, get the hell out. We've had enough. You baguette-eating bastards."
Yes.
Nothing against the French. I have good French friends.
And the French are so far away. Yeah, yes, cheese and wine and and baguettes. But it's okay. There's no such thing as reverse racism. We'll make that joke.
There you go. I love the French. Some of my friends. I have very good friends that are French. So that was just.
I love French cheeses, man. Also, right?
Not Macron.
Yeah. And look, listen. People are people. There's no nobody better or worse. And our histories, our leaders are different than peoplehood. We make jokes. New Caledonia. Yes, New Caledonia. Right now, the French don't have ships anywhere close, so they just requested the aid of New Zealand and Australia, and the New Zealand and Australia are maybe going to occupy now New Caledonia. And remember, this is also very close to the other islands in the Pacific that had signed treaties with China.
Solomon Islands, yes, Solomon Islands.
Right. So this is all. Now we could see another region beginning to escape Western hegemony because of the prolifications of the fronts and because of the victories of the axis of resistance on the battlefield and the victories of Russia on the battlefield. This is the ramifications of it, and we will see more. So Senegal joining the Sahel coalition, Caledonia joining the New Caledonia joining the Pacific Islanders that are escaping. what's going to happen in the Caribbean. I predict the next things that are going to happen, by the way, are in the Caribbean. Look at Haiti. Is at any moment things could be happening in there. And so,
Evo Morales is running for president again in Bolivia.
oh yes, and we all hope that he wins and raises the flag of indigenous liberation again in the Americas. That's going to be a big trouble for the U.S. and Canada, reviving indigenous nationalism. Wow.
Yeah, with all that, and they got a lot of lithium. You know, when they were signing a deal with their lithium over China before, is what got them overthrown. And I think right now they're going to be right back saying, okay, you know, I heard him say, I was in Venezuela with, fortunately, I was in a room. I didn't talk to either of them, but with Rafael Correa and Evo Morales. I was fortunate when I was there. I was at the as a guest of the Venezuelan government. So, you know, I heard him talk. One of the things that he said, interestingly, was, and he said this on several occasions, that they've got lithium. He went to South Korea and said, hey, we want to build a factory where we, you know, that you got to take the lithium and change it so it's usable, right? And how much would that cost? And the South Korean said about 100 million. He said, no problem, we got it. Let's get it done. He went back, he called the South Korean, said, got the money, let's make it happen. And they said, now the Americans said, we can't do it. So again, it is the Africans with their chocolate or whatever. It's the Western Empire saying you can grow, you can create the raw materials. But our countries have to even control that. Then you can get the minimal amount, but you're not allowed to get to the point where you develop the stuff and you make the real profit off of it. And I would guarantee if Evo Morales goes back to power, through China or Russia or Iran, one of the world's great powers, he'll be able to get the funding. He'll be able to get he already has the funding. He'll be able to get the technical assistance. And that's what they're really angry about, that Iran and Russia and trying to have the technological ability and the power to go into these countries and to help them develop themselves.
Oh yes, and this is the new world. Every country will have to have the whole production line of whatever resources, natural resources it has, to be able to kind of equalize the imports and exports, and then we have a more equal world where all nations have the same opportunity of development and escaping poverty and disease. And so, and this is good for China, it's good for Russia, it's good for Africa, it's good for Latin America, but it's not good for the West. The West not only wants to loot the raw resources of other nations at the cheapest price, it also doesn't want to produce anything from it. They want to open factories in cheap markets to produce. So, and only owning the marketing part of the whole production cycle and taking 70% of all the profit. So it doesn't make sense from any business point of view. And this is, I think once this new world starts to flourish, Europe is going to be the biggest loser. At least Canada and the United States have mass amounts of raw materials and natural resources that if they rearrange their own production cycles can escape the collapse. But Europe has zero natural resources, zero. And, you know, so what is it going to do without the cheap natural resources of Africa, Asia, and Latin America? It's going to collapse. And so the new world that's arising is totally about having full sovereignty over the full production cycle that is dependent on raw resources.
Laith Marouf is a journalist, and he's in Beirut, Lebanon. Don't forget, everyone, the website is freepalestine.video. Go to freepalestine.video and donate. If you can't afford to donate, that's perfectly fine. There's a lot of people that are struggling. We understand that this system is crushing the little guy. So, but you can still help. And here's what you do. Go all of your social media accounts. Go to freepalestine.video and share that on your social media accounts and make a little caption that says that advises everyone to to let everyone know the importance of donating. We can all work together, and Laith and his people can get an English language journalism out from freepalestine.video. They can get video out. We can help this thing to grow. So let's do our part to help Laith and his people at freepalestine.video. Share it. Let people know how important it is, how critical it is that they donate. And if you can spend, look, whatever it is, if you can pay 100, 100, if you can do $5, $5, whatever amount you can do is more than they got now. And if enough people get together and put a few bucks in, then something will happen and they'll be able to continue and expand on their work. Thanks a lot, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. We're out.